All right, and then we're live. Just wait for a couple seconds, see if anybody comes in.
Can you see how many people are here?
I can. I'm not sure if you can, but up in
I
the
can.
upper.
All right, hold
left.
on. I'm making this request now. We need like an intro at the beginning of all of these, like like the CNN intro, like.
No. Hi guys, welcome to the debate series. I'm your host, a woman with pink hair. All right, so I'm gonna read the before debate spiel, and then we're gonna get going. All right. The goal of these debates is to promote discussion of important issues facing us today. We want to create a space that is open to possible to new ideas and perspectives, both within these discussions and within our Brett community. My goal as a moderator is to make sure this happens. I will be warning you when we're approaching the end of our time, but other than that, my job is to make sure this is a civil space. Any kind of disrespect towards other participants will not be tolerated. The rules of this debate as follows. Each participant will be given 2 minutes to make their opening statements, after which there will be about 10 minutes of open discussion. We'll close out with 5 minutes of audience questions. For our viewers, we ask that you will use the chat at the end for questions. Let's start with Sahana's opening.
Okay, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited. I'll go for it. All right, so democracy is a notion that human society should be governed by ethical principles. I resolve that the Electoral College should be abolished or reformed for the following reasons. 1. The Electoral College does not account for proportional representation. 2. It is an unethical system that upholds modernized slavery and other inherently racist values. 3. It has been an inconsistent system since the first election in 1789. And 4. It leads to the contestation of an election. I'll start off by explaining the proportional representation part for the time I have. The difference in state populations in the United States is not reflected in the number of electors each state has in the Electoral College. 723,000, okay, Josh didn't hear the fourth one. I said the fourth one was, it has been an inconsistent system. Or no, I said that one, never mind. The fourth one is, it leads to the contestation of an election. I hope you got that. I'll keep going. Anyway.
I did, thank you. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. Continue.
Okay, anyway, 723,315 Californians equal 1 electoral vote, whereas in Wyoming, 194,717 Wyomingites, which is a word, by the way, equal 1 electoral vote. Wyoming, therefore, has 3.18 electoral votes to each one of California's. And therefore, each voter in Wyoming has more voting power in the Senate and in deciding who our next president will be. Californians simply don't have their full rights as do citizens. This is where the disparity occurs. Why can't Americans elect their own representatives by popular vote? I'll stop there.
All right, thank you, McKenna. Good morning. For those who don't know, my name is Josh, and I'm going to be arguing the pro-Electoral College stance today. Full disclosure to everyone watching, this is not my actual position. I agree with Sahana that the Electoral College is outdated and unnecessary. However, we couldn't find anyone willing to defend the Electoral College, so I will do so to the best of my ability, and will do so as if I genuinely believe it, in order to provide you, the viewer, the best sides of both arguments. Speaking of, if you ever want to participate in an SLS debate, please reach out to me, McKenna, Sahana, Abby, or Max Langer, and we will put you in one. We love having other people debate. Speaking of the best of arguments, let's talk about what I'm going to be arguing today. A little background information so that everyone knows what we're talking about. The Electoral College was established in the Constitution as the official way to elect the president because the founders did not believe in mob rule, instead adding that the Electoral College as a fail-safe to prevent voters from acting against their own self-interest. Hamilton said that the Electoral College prevents anyone without an eminent degree endowed with the requisite qualifications. This, at a time when many simply did not have the effort or ability to follow politics as closely as these electors did, was a way to ensure that the people weren't electing someone vastly unqualified for the office. And while the need for this has since diminished, the Electoral College is still the best way of determining the president of the United States. And I will explain why in our open debate, but I'll just mention the 3 main reasons now. It protects the states, particularly the small states, It forces the president to build a national coalition versus just a regional or a cultural one. And finally, it prevents all sorts of potential problems with direct democracy, such as money, recounts, and certifiable results. Finally, I'd like to thank Sahana and McKenna for moderating this debate. I'm excited to get started.
All right, thank you guys very much. I think we agreed on 10 minutes of opening conversation, and that's gonna start now.
So during this time, I kind of like to just briefly flesh out a little bit of my points, if you don't mind, Sahana. I promise
Sure, I'll do it after you.
So first off, it protects the states, particularly the small states. So what this means is that if this were a direct democracy, states like Wyoming that you just said that get a unproportional amount of representation in the Electoral College, they wouldn't even get visited. Like they would not even, no one would care about what happens in Wyoming. And therefore, the needs and wants of like the small town worker wouldn't get represented in the president. Instead, it would be represented in big cities and industrial and corporate interests. Secondly, it forces the president to build a national coalition. So hypothetically, if it was just a direct democracy, the candidates running for president can just fly around to like all the big cities and just get all the big city votes. And that leaves the other half of America, or even more than half of America, left without a voice in deciding the presidency. Finally, it prevents all sorts of potential problems with direct democracy, such as money, recounts, and certifiable results. I'd like to just say this right now. Imagine the 2000 election if there was a national recount. Gore won Florida by 537 votes. Imagine if we had to do a national recount because we didn't have the states voting, we had the people voting. That would have taken significantly longer, significantly more money, and would have left the American public even feeling more anxious about the will of their vote. Another point that the Electoral College is actually preventing is money. Campaign finance is a huge problem right now. And imagine how much more it would be if a Democrat had to spend money to campaign in California, a state that in the Electoral College, they don't particularly have to campaign in. The amount of money that a campaign would have to spend in a direct democracy is exponential compared to the money that they currently have to spend now.
Okay, I'm going to take some time to respond to those arguments.
Go right ahead.
Starting with your first one, when you say it protects smaller states, I would argue that it actually gives more power to the swing states, or the purple states as we know it. And that in turn can actually affect the entire outcome of an election. That's problematic to me, if anything else. When you said the national coalition and that half of Americans would be underrepresented, if it weren't for the Electoral College, wait, what was I going to say? I was going to say that it actually ignores the will of the people. So in contrast to that, if you're not taking the popular vote into account, then how are you supposed to really gauge what people believe? And for your last point, which you say prevents, problems like certifiable, like having to recount the election and everything, I would take you to what's going on in our world right now. We have a president that refuses to concede because of so-called voter fraud. And I think the Electoral College just adds a bunch of uncertainties and makes people believe that, votes should be recounted and voter fraud is actually a thing. But if you take that away and say it's simply the popular vote, you're taking away that whole other level of confusion. All right, now that I've responded to those arguments, I will go more in depth with my own.
Go right ahead.
So I just want to reiterate that the Electoral College does not account for proportional representation. The fact that California and Wyoming and Texas and Rhode Island, none of it is even. There's an unproportional amount of bias, I guess, that goes towards Wyoming and other less populous states. And that itself is just not a fair and just system. And that democracy itself was founded on the idea that ethical principles should be governed in nature. This is clearly not ethical, in my opinion. And I'm going to go to the point of modernized slavery, which at a first glance might seem very extreme. But if you think about it, our founding fathers back then supported the 3/5 compromise, where a slave accounted for 3/5 of a full vote. And the fact that we're still going along with what our so-called white founding fathers said, 2 centuries ago is incredibly problematic. We're just reinforcing the idea that these racist values are okay. It's time to move on from the status quo. Do we really want to go back in time and uphold voter discrimination? I don't think that's where we're headed, and we should not be there. I would also like to point you to the idea that the number of electoral college votes was never really consistent. Prior to 1804, each elector casted 2 votes for a president, effectively doubling the votes that were cast. And the number of electoral votes among states has been shifting for years because, of course, new states were added to the United States, but there was never really a consistent system. So if we're really saying we're doing this for consistency to go along with what our founding fathers said, it really wasn't that consistent. And that's the problem too. And then my last point was we need to reform. So I understand that, effectively abolishing the Electoral College is not exactly feasible, given that this has been a system that's been in place for 2 centuries, and all the reasons that you mentioned, Josh, too. So I do think we could potentially find common ground in reforming the winner-takes-all approach. So, that could mean taking on the Maine and Nebraska's congressional district method, where 2 electoral votes are allocated to the state popular vote winner, and then 1 electoral vote to the popular vote winner in each congressional district. This is basically going within the state to identify who would be the best candidate based off a popular vote, but also keeps that electoral college balance too. So I could see this as an option for where we could be heading. So,
all right,
just going to take it away.
All right, so instead of just going through all your points again and then we keep going back and forth, let's just start talking. So first off, I'd like to remind you that America is not a democracy, it's a republic. We elect people to make our decisions for us. We don't vote on the things, we vote for the people who vote on the things.
That's an indirect democracy.
Yes, indirect democracy or a republic. And the Electoral College is a republic, essentially. It is, we vote on we vote on the electors, and then the electors vote for us. All right. So your whole point about democracy and like it's going against the nature of democracy, we're not a democracy. We're a republic. Like I don't see the big point with that.
All right, I would just go back to the idea that, despite democracy or not democracy, we were founded on the principles that we are going to have an ethical government. And the fact that we are still upholding modernized slavery and voter discrimination from 2 centuries ago is itself a red flag. And there, you could say democracy or not democracy. I just say it's immoral, it's inhumane, and it's frankly racist. So that's the point where I'm heading about ethicalness or ethicality. I don't know.
Hold on. No, I'm not going to argue with you that voter discrimination doesn't exist, because it does. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to ask you instead, how does the Electoral College uphold voter discrimination instead of the states themselves deciding to voter discriminate, which is separate from the Electoral College?
Yeah, I mean, I would go back to the idea that it's never been a consistent system, and the Electoral College can actually lead to, the contestation of an election, which is also another red flag, and it can go against the citizens' beliefs. And the whole idea is the Electoral College pretty much ignores the will of the people. You're not voting for your candidate, you're voting for your representatives. Why can't it just be a direct go-to line to voting for your president, voting for your elected officials? Because the people themselves know what they want, and doesn't make sense to me. And I understand why we've had this in place, and it's been a while since we've had it, so we don't want to get rid of it. But it's time to change the status quo. We're in the 21st century.
We are, in fact, in the 21st century. But just going back, like the reason that it was existed was kind of like a fail-safe. Like Hamilton said, it's basically saying that the president can't be someone that's unreasonably qualified. Yeah, that's the reason for why it exists. Dang it, I forgot what I was going to say to counterpoint that. Anyway, let's kind of just move on then.
It's Friday morning.
It is Friday morning. God, it's been a long week. All right. So you didn't really kind of answer my question about how the Electoral College upholds voter discrimination. Because again, some of the states a majority of states in America do discriminate voters and make it harder for voters to vote. Oh, we got 1 minute left. Wow.
All right.
All good. But the Electoral College itself doesn't do that. And again, it's a fail-safe against our democracy. And also, going back to your point about it creates like inconsistencies and uncertifiable results, I actually would argue that the Electoral College certifies the vote. it puts a rubber stamp on the will of the people saying, yes, this is your president. This is our president. This is how we're going to do it.
Do you mind if I jump in a second?
Go right ahead. You got the last
30 seconds left. So I want to talk about your point of the fail-safe given the time that we have. I could get political here about who's a qualified president and who isn't. And frankly, I think most people know where I'm headed. I think, you know what, leave it in the hands of the people. It's as simple as that. We shouldn't have other people deciding who is best for our well-being. That's our decision itself. And that goes back to the idea of free will. And yes, we're a republic, but we're also an indirect democracy, which needs to be reformed. It's time to change the status quo. But you know where I'm heading with the fail-safe.
All right, and with that, I normally right now I'd say leave open for 5 minutes of audience questions. Does anyone in our audience have questions?
It's okay if you don't.
You know what? How about let's break a little bit and I'll ask you guys some questions instead.
Oh, very
so cool. I'm going to start with Joshua. So you're arguing that this is actually better for the democracy. This makes it more. Then what do you say that, like, I think the last 5 out of our 6 elections have the winner of the popular vote, or it might just be Republican candidates actually. For Republican candidates, for the last 5 out of the 6, the winner of the popular vote is not necessarily the winner of the Electoral College. What do you say to that discrepancy? You know what I'm talking about.
Yes, no, I know what you're talking about. And I believe the stat you're saying is like Democrats have won the popular vote in the past 7 out of 8 elections. And for me, that has really nothing to do with the Electoral College and all more about Republican messaging and Democratic messaging. I think right now, Democratic messaging is reaching out to more people than Republicans is. And the Republicans are just using the Electoral College to get the votes. But I don't think that's a knock about the Electoral College. I think that's actually a strength of it. It allows a minority voice in America to still have the same voice as it does with the majority.
All right, and then to you, Sahana, I'm going to ask you also a question. You kind of were railing against the Founding Fathers, and not that I disagree with you. The Founding Fathers were kind of bad people in some ways, but they really did build the foundation for a great nation. If we say that the Electoral College is gone, are you taking the rest of the Constitution with it, or where do you draw the line?
Yeah, no, that's really valid. I agree. So, you know, the Founding Fathers definitely have their flaws, but if we are going to step forward, and like I said earlier in the debate, repealing the Electoral College isn't exactly a feasible option because we've been doing it for so long. I would really say that the whole country needs to adopt the congressional district method that Maine and Nebraska use because it's a perfect balance between the popular vote but also the Electoral College. Because right now we have swing states and the Rust Belt that basically determine the whole entire 2016 election. We have the discrepancies, like McKenna said, where the popular vote can sometimes be in the favor of the candidate that didn't win, but the Electoral College is actually in the favor of the candidate that ends up winning. So I think the congressional district method is a fair way to eliminate those discrepancies and allow for, you know, the will of the people to come through, while also keeping this framework that the Founding Fathers created for us 2 centuries ago that does have its benefits, and I can admit that too. So,
all right, I'm going to give a chance for anyone in the comments to put forth a question for a couple 30 seconds. Well, I just thank both of you for coming on stream today. That was a lot of fun and a very interesting discussion. You both were so polite. It was just opening statements all the way down.
Yeah, so funny. I'm glad though.
Yeah, so I don't see any comments being put in, so I think I'm actually going to call it.
Okay.
And that was a successful episode 2 of SLS. See you guys back next week when we possibly debate capitalism. All right. If any of you in the audience are a staunch capitalist, please email us. All right.
All right. Wait, leave a comment. Hold on.
We got one.
How does gerrymandering affect the Electoral College?
All right, Bella, excellent question. I think gerrymandering has more to do with voter discrimination and voter suppression in general and less with the Electoral College. Gerrymandering affects not only Electoral College, but congressional districts and Senate districts and elections in general. I think whoever is in charge, it is very easy whenever like the census comes around, it's very easy for them to gerrymander and to create the votes so that it's easier for your party to win or for you to win specifically. So I think gerrymandering definitely has an effect on the Electoral College. I just don't think that it should be a knock on the Electoral College because gerrymandering is going to be present no matter what we do.
Yep. It goes deeper than that. I agree with what Josh said. And it can also affect like different communities of people from different socioeconomic and racial backgrounds, which is another line of voter discrimination. And the whole system itself, gerrymandering itself, is just, it's kind of corrupt. I'm not going to lie. So, but yeah, Josh answered it well.
I don't think anyone can honestly argue for gerrymandering. We're not going to have a should we have gerrymandering SLS debate. Thank you for your question, Bella. I appreciate it.
I mean, we will host any debate if you find people for it. If you can find pro and con gerrymandering people, we'd love to host that debate.
Yep.
All right. I'm going to give it 30 more seconds to see if we get
yes,
a question.
during that 30 seconds, I'd like to make a final point.
Yeah. There's not closing arguments, but all right.
The debate's over, Josh.
McKenna, if you could just put my face center. All right. Thank you. America. I'm sorry. The final point I'd like to make is about money because this really didn't get talked about a lot, but I think it's a very.
I'm sorry, Josh. I am going to cut you off. You cannot.
Can we not? This debate is over. Otherwise, I would go off. No, we're not doing that.
Okay.
It could go on forever,
Josh.
Josh.
A summation statement, but you can't bring a new point in your conclusion.
And we don't have much time, but.
All right. Well, thank you both so very much for coming and debating with us. We'll see you next week when we talk about the ethics of capitalism. If you are a capitalist or a communist or socialist, please email actually any of the three people you see on the screen, in addition to Abby Samuel and.
Ooh, we got a question.
We got an important question.
Why not make an electoral university? Wonderful question.
Thank you. Actually, that came in from Peyton. We will address that next time on SLS. Insert outro music here. It was great having you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. And join SLS. It's so much fun.
All right, see you guys.
Bye.